Is anyone out there listening? Good. You've tuned into Lavender Town Radio, the only station brave enough to broadcast the static between worlds. Tonight, we have a story for you, a whisper from the shadows, a tale woven from the dark pages of the Pokédex that they never wanted you to read. But first, a small favor. If you find a chilling comfort in our stories, show your support by hitting the like button. It's a small click for you, but it's a beacon for us in the digital darkness. And to ensure you never miss a transmission, make sure you subscribe and ring that little bell. It helps our signal cut through the noise. All right, the signal is clear. Now, are you comfortable? Good. Let's begin.
My world has a delicate balance. It isn't the balance between good and evil or light and dark like in the fairy tales. It's the balance between presence and absence, between the spirits that linger and the silence they leave behind. I have spent my entire life walking that line. Atop Mount Pyre, where the air is thick with the scent of memories and withered flowers, I learned to listen to the silence. I conversed with wandering Duskull, comforted abandoned Shuppet. I understood their language, the language of regret, of attachment, of stories left unfinished. I thought I understood their world. I thought I knew the boundaries. Stephen Stone, with all his scientific logic and his love for tangible things, proved that I was arrogantly wrong. The call came on a quiet afternoon while I was meditating with my Pokémon at the summit of Mount Pyre. The Hone sunset painted the mountain in shades of red, and the air was serene. The chime of my holocaster broke the tranquility. It was Stephen. Phoebe, excellent, you picked up. His voice rang out, not with the usual calm composure of a champion, but with the giddiness of a child who had just found a rare gem in his backyard. Hello, Stephen, I replied, a smile playing on my lips. Did you find a carbink with an unusual coloration? Better, so much better, he said, and I could hear his hurried footsteps on the other end. I'm in Kalos, Lumio City, and Phoebe, you won't believe what I'm holding. It defies every law of crystallography I've ever known. A rock has you this excited? I teased. Not just any rock. They call it a mega stone. Specifically, this one is Gengarite. Do you hear that? Gengarite. It's supposed to unlock a hidden power within a Gengar, something called mega evolution. But its energy, it's like nothing else. It's cold. It doesn't radiate energy, it absorbs it. It's like holding a tiny black hole in my hand. It's fascinating. My curiosity began to stir. Mega evolution. I had heard of it, a phenomenon endemic to the Kalos region, said to only occur with a perfect bond between a trainer and their Pokémon. It sounds interesting, but why call me? I don't even train a Gengar. That's just it, Stephen said. I'm a scientist. I can analyze its structure, its density, but its energy, it belongs to your world, Phoebe. It's spiritual. It's ghostly. I can't comprehend it. And frankly, it gives me the creeps. So I have a proposal. Come to Lumio City. I'll give it to you. A gift. In return, you just have to let me, observe while you study it. Under safe, controlled conditions, of course. A gift, an invitation to research, and a challenge. I had never trained a Gengar. It was true. I always found them too chaotic, too mischievous. I preferred the serene, solemn dignity of Dusknoir or the deep sorrow of Banette. Gengar was like a joke I never quite understood. But a stone that could unlock another form of existence for a ghost-type Pokémon? A gateway to an unknown power? My professional curiosity won. "All right, Steven," I said. "You've convinced me, but I'll need some time to prepare." "Excellent! I'll be waiting in Lumios. Oh, and Phoebe, bring a jacket. It gets colder here at night than you think." After the call, I did something I had never done before. I traveled to Lavender Tower and sought out a ghastly. I found a particularly mischievous one, always eluding the others. I sensed a great potential within it. Within a week, with focused training, it evolved into a Haunter, and then with a trade, into a Gengar. It was loyal, powerful, and wore a grin that seemed permanently etched on its face. I named him Grin. I was ready. Or so I thought. Lumios City was a symphony of light and architecture. It was the complete antithesis to the quiet serenity of Mount Pyre. I met Steven at a chic cafe at the base of the prison tower. He looked like an explorer, just returned from an adventure, his eyes shining with excitement. "Phoebe, glad you could make it," he said, placing a small velvet-lined box on the table. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a cushion of black silk, was a round, dark purple stone. It didn't sparkle. Instead, it seemed to drink the light around it, creating a small pocket of darkness on the table. When I reached out to touch it, I felt it instantly. An emptiness, a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. The ghost Pokemon I knew all radiated a psychic energy, whether it was warm, sad, or playful, but this stone, it radiated nothing. It only pooled in. It was like touching a cracked open door to a room in a perfect vacuum. "See," Steven said, "it's bizarre." "It's more than bizarre, Steven," I whispered. "It's silent." We decided to conduct our experiment the next day at a licensed training area on the outskirts of the city, where there is plenty of space and safety measures. I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in a long time, the thrill of a researcher on the verge of discovering something entirely new. I stood at one end of the training field, Grin floating beside me, its grin even wider than usual. Steven stood at a safe distance with an array of measuring devices. "Ready, Phoebe?" he called. I took a deep breath. "Ready." I raised my arm, the keystone on my bracelet beginning to glow. I focused on the bond between me and Grin. "Grin, respond to my heart. Surpass the limit. Mega evolve." The evolution was spectacular. Energy erupted not from Grin, but from the keystone and the Gengarite, forming ribbons of purple light that connected us. Grin cattled maniacally, and just as the textbooks described, the lower half of its body melted, sinking into its own shadow on the concrete ground. A third yellow eye opened on its forehead. Mecha Gengar had emerged, radiating an incredible pressure of power. "The energy output is off the charts," Steven yelled from the sidelines, his devices beeping furiously. But I wasn't just feeling power. As someone with an affinity for the spirit world, I felt something else, a faint connection, a tear that had just been made. I could feel the part of Grin that had sunk into the shadow was now somewhere else, and my curiosity won out over my caution. While Steven was busy with his numbers, I did something no other trainer probably would. I closed my eyes. I pushed my consciousness along the stream of energy, through our bond and into the mind of Mega Gengar. I wanted to see where it was connected to. For just a second, I succeeded, and I wished to the stars I hadn't. My vision was plunged into an endless gray. I was standing in a space with no up and no down. The ground was a glossy, mirror-like plane, reflecting a sky with no stars and no sun. Floating in that space were countless silent figures, distorted two-dimensional copies of people and Pokémon, all made of pure shadow. They didn't move, they just existed, and all of them were staring at me, at the gate I had just curiously opened. I heard no sound, but I could feel it. A cold, endless hunger, a desperate yearning for the warmth, the emotion, the life of my world. I hadn't just looked into another dimension, I had alerted its inhabitants. I hastily pulled my consciousness back. By the time I opened my eyes, Mega Gengar had reverted to its normal form. I staggered, my knees buckling. "Phoebe, are you all right?" Stephen ran over, concerned. "I'm fine," I lied, catching my breath. Its energy is stronger than I thought." I didn't tell him the whole truth. How could I? How could I explain that I had just looked into the eyes of the abyss, and I had the distinct feeling that the abyss had looked right back at me? I realized I had touched something primal and dangerous, but instead of being afraid, a dark, curious part of me, the part that was an expert in ghost types, felt intrigued. I had opened a door, and I wanted to know what was on the other side.
I convinced Stephen that I needed more time to study the Gengar rite on my own, in a quieter environment. He, respecting my expertise, agreed and let me borrow a small apartment the Devon Corporation kept for him in Lumiose. It was a mistake. The isolation only made the horror more potent. And it began subtly. The first day, I was sitting in the living room, reading an ancient text on collusion rituals. Grin was floating by the window, looking out at the city. I waved at it without looking up. A moment later, I glanced up. Grin was still there, but its shadow on the floor, it waved back at me, a fraction of a second after my own action. I blanked. It must have been a trick of the strange Lumiose light filtered through the tall buildings. That's what I told myself. But then, the strange occurrences began to happen to my own shadow. I was standing in front of the mirror, brushing my hair. I smiled at my reflection. But my shadow on the wall behind me, it didn't smile. Its mouth remained a flat, emotionless line. I spun around. The shadow was there, perfectly mimicking my every move again. I'm imagining things, I reassured myself. I'm just tired. But my denial was growing weaker. On the third day, I was meditating, trying to find my center. When I opened my eyes, I saw that my shadow was no longer sitting in a symmetrical position to me. It had shifted slightly to the left, as if it had moved on its own while my eyes were closed. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. It wasn't just mimicking anymore. It was learning. It was testing its independence. The real horror began when it started to interact with the physical world. That night, I was reading in bed. I placed a glass of water on my nightstand. I looked away for a second to turn the page. When I looked back, the glass was on the floor, water pooling around it. I was sure I had set it down firmly. I looked down at my own shadow, cast long on the floor by my reading lamp. The shadow of my arm seemed to be retracting from the spot where the puddle was. I didn't sleep that night. I left the lights on. I sat up in bed, hugging my knees, and watched my shadow. It lay there, still, harmless, but I knew it was waiting for the dark. And the next night, I made a mistake. I was too exhausted. I dozed off for a few minutes with the lamp still on. I woke up to a feeling of cold. The room was pitch black. The lamp had been turned off, and I couldn't breathe. A heavy, invisible pressure was crushing my chest. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Panicked, I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. My hands were trembling, but I managed to turn on the screen.
The phone's weak light illuminated the ceiling, and I screamed a choked, strangled sound. It was there, no longer a two-dimensional shadow on the wall. It had detached. It was floating directly above me, a three-dimensional entity, black as tar, in my exact shape. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a featureless void in the shape of a human, and its shadowy arms were pressing down on my chest. Grin, sensing my terror, burst from its Pokeball. It fired a shadow ball at the entity, but the globes of dark energy simply passed right through it, causing no damage. The entity turned its head to look at Grin, and then it lunged, not at me, but at my Gengar. It enveloped Grin, and I heard my Pokémon let out a pained moan as if its very spirit was being drained. With a final, desperate effort, I threw myself sideways, my hand slapping the light switch on the wall. Instantly, the room was flooded with light. The entity let out a silent scream and dissolved, not into thin air, but back into my own shadow, lying innocently on the floor. Grin fell onto the bed, panting heavily. I had narrowly escaped death. I sat there, trembling in the electric light, and finally accepted the truth. When I had curiously looked into the shadow realm, something from the other side had looked back. It had latched onto my shadow, and it was using it as a puppet, a bridge, a gateway to enter my world. And it wouldn't stop until it had crossed over completely.
And so, our story comes to a close, but the echoes always remain, don't they? Thank you for spending your time with me here at Lavender Town Radio. Your presence makes these dark nights a little less lonely. But do not be mistaken, this is not the end. The true nightmare is yet to come. This was only part 1. What did you think of tonight's tale? What horrors did it awaken in you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. I find them illuminating. If this story sent a chill down your spine, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It's the only way to ensure you'll be here to witness the conclusion. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.